Welcome to Sunflower Movement. I'm your host, Ashley Buckner. Quick disclaimer before we get started. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. This platform is not a form of psychotherapy, counseling, or healthcare of any kind. Sunflowers bloom in the most unexpected places, always adjusting to stay connected to the sun. I see these sunflower movements as the moments, people, and places where we feel seen, heard, and believed, where healing takes root and transformation begins. If you're seeking that kind of space, you're in the right place. I'm all about being low maintenance to be a high maintenance girly, and my heatless curler from Cozy Confidence makes it so easy. I've tried satin curlers before, but they always made my curls too tight. I love the texture of this one. It gives my hair extra body without feeling overdone. I just sleep in it overnight, brush it out in the morning, add some dry shampoo at the roots if needed, and a little oil on the ends for shine. It makes my morning routine so much easier. If you want to simplify your getting ready routine, Cozy Confidence has you covered. Use my code AshleyB at cozyconfidence.com for 10% off anytime. Your hair will thank you. If you've ever dealt with sore muscles, tension, or just need a moment to reset, you need to try Pranamat. I won't lie, it's a little spendy, but I use mine every single day and it's 100% worth it. Whether I'm winding down, releasing tension, or even working on muscle tone, it makes a huge difference. I lay on it in so many different positions and every time I feel the impact. If you've been thinking about it, now's the time to try it. Use my code AshleyB for 10% off at pranamat.com. Your body will thank you. I've been using this supplement for the past year and I'm not stopping anytime soon. Let's talk about Armra colostrum. I love it for the immune-boosting benefits, workout recovery, and even the strength it's given to my hair. It's become a staple in my routine, and I can genuinely feel the difference. If you're looking for an easy way to support your body from the inside out, this is it. Head to tryarmra.com/AshleyBuckner and use code AshleyBuckner for 15% off. Give it a try. You'll see why I'm hooked. All right, welcome back, everyone. I am very excited for today's episode. I'm actually in a podcast studio for Disruptors Media, a company that helps me do all of my podcasting. And I'm here with my editor and producer, Carson Ireland. You've got to know me very intimately over the last 6-7 months. So I'm excited to sit down and have this conversation. How are you feeling?
Me too. Good. It's been fun, and it is kind of interesting. It's the first time I've met you in person right now, but I've gone through all of your episodes and seen so much of your content, so it's like I already feel like I know you, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's such an interesting experience to only meet someone virtually, and I feel like podcasting is a really vulnerable, intimate experience, and you're putting yourself out there in a way, and in a lot of ways you were a stranger to me.
Yeah.
7 months ago. And now I'm like doing this brand new thing, this brand new journey, and you're editing all of my episodes and listening to me. And there's been ups and downs in my personal journey. And I feel like you've been really, really supportive of that for sure.
Thank you. I'm glad. But it's putting yourself out there and just speaking your mind on anything like you do all the time. It's like your audience gets to know you, like I'm getting to know you, but at the same time, it's just such a process, right? But it's been fun to kind of like get to know you through your message, through your mission, and just all the stuff that you're building. It's really, it resonates with me, and so it's fun to be behind that.
Yeah. I have to tell you guys, so Carson, so when I decided, it was back in August, and I was thinking about starting a podcast, and my social media had a decent following at that time, and I had started recording, just trying to figure this out by myself. And I couldn't. This is so hard. How do people podcast? And you happened to DM me. It was divine, I swear. Like I had spent the week prior trying to figure out how to do a podcast. You sent me a DM about what you do, and the rest is history. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. And the reason why I felt inclined to even jump in like that was just the work that we do anyways. I do so much better when it's like behind something that like I stand for, or that I am inspired by, or something that I can back. And so after, I don't know how long I had followed you before that, but it's like, I just felt that inclination because it was like, yes, like I could see a lot of people jumping in and supporting what you were doing, but then it's funny because you see like the other side as well. And so with that, it's like, there's so much to I just saw there's so much to do here, and so I felt really inspired to like message you. Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad you did because I don't know Sunflower Movement would exist without you guys because it was just not something I really had the capacity to take on, but I knew I wanted to do. I wanted to have a different outlet than what was happening on social media. So I'm really, really grateful for that.
It would exist. You'd find a way. You'd find your way.
I would have found my way. I think I want to ask too, like, why don't you tell listeners a little bit about what you do, about your like company that you work for, and just like how you got into this line of work?
Yeah,
I think that would be important.
So yeah, we do pretty much anything for like digital marketing, but we focus a lot on like the videography, the podcasting. So just basically anything that you need, that companies or personal brands need online to kind of share their mission. Kyle here running the camera, he's very focused on even like mission directed messages, I guess, with the companies we work with. So he calls them movements too. So like, Sunflower Movement, that's so on brand for that. I got into this line of work randomly. I kind of did videography, like music videos and such when I was growing up, and skateboard videos. But it kind of happened like in a really weird way. I just did van life with my dog one summer, and I jumped in doing this kind of work freelance with certain musicians and authors and yogis and really cool people that I was inspired by. And it just happened to line up really nicely. And then once that finished up, I came back to Utah and started teaching. And then from there, I kind of found my way with these guys and here at the company we're at. So
cool.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing I really liked about when I first met with you and Kyle about just your company was I felt very much seen and heard and listened to, and I didn't have like it. I didn't feel like things were being sold to me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I needed. It was very much about what did I need? How could you guys support that? And I think that's why it's continued to just be like such a special relationship for me and allowed me to feel really safe to be like, oh, I don't know if this is working. I need help. I'm scared. I don't know if I want to keep doing the podcast, all the things, all the conversations we have. So I just really appreciate that. I'm curious. You just said you were a teacher.
Yeah, for a while. I did like a year and a half. Yeah.
What age? What grade?
It was a Montessori school.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was ages, I think it would be like fourth to sixth grade, essentially. Yeah.
How did you get into that?
Just when I came back, I didn't want to jump back into. So when I went and did van life for a while and kind of traveled across the country and working with different people, that was like the most free I had felt for a long time. So when I came back, I didn't want to jump right back into just another job. So I took my time figuring out, and I was still working with a couple of the people that I was working with, just based out here instead. And while I was doing that, I was like, okay, I need to jump into something else. But I wanted it to be something that felt meaningful to me. And it wasn't just like I was just trading my time for money. And so it happened to be teaching at the time. Yeah. So I did that for about a year and a half, learned a lot, and it served its purpose to kind of be a job. But at the same time, it gave me, I don't know what to say, but it was like basically it gave me more purpose than just like trading my time.
Yeah. I like how diverse your experience is.
Yeah, I'm kind of random.
but I think that allows you to show up really authentically and allows you to be really open, in my opinion, because I've done a lot of different podcast episodes, a lot of different content. And obviously you are familiar with Mormonism, and that is a part of the podcast, but I feel like it's also so broad, and it's making more sense to me why you can't just hold space in the way that you do, kind of knowing how diverse your experience is. I am curious if you could just share a little bit about, because you grew up in Utah.
I did, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and all of that?
So I grew up in Utah, Eagle Mountain, Utah. And I come from, the only time I actually ever moved outside of Utah was for my LDS mission, actually.
Okay.
Funny enough. So I went to Mexico. But other than that, I've always been in Utah and kind of moved around different places outside of that. My family's still out in Eagle Mountain. But I grew up Mormon. My family's Mormon, and um, served an LDS mission out in Mexico, like I said, and then yeah, I'm still in Utah. I love it. There was a time that I was kind of itching to get out of Utah because after my mission, I ended up leaving the church and not being part of that demographic or part of that paradigm anymore. And I'm like, oh, it's so hard to be around Utah because it feels like I mean, it is
It
everywhere.
is everywhere. Yeah.
And it's so funny because my perspective now, it's like it is everywhere, but it's like I changed my perspective on that and find a lot of like fun in that now instead of like suffocation where it's like it's easy to get there after that. But anyways, just to say, yeah, I've always been here.
I think it actually would be really helpful for listeners to maybe hear what allowed you to shift that perspective,
Mm.
because I think that this is very common. I mean, I feel it too
Mhm.
sometimes, like the suffocation that you have described. And so I'm like also selfishly like wanting your answer too for
Yeah.
myself. But I would love to hear you expand on like how it was suffocating, but now it's not. And how did you get to that? Like what helped you get
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. Well, ultimately I feel like we're in charge of like how we see the world.
Mhm.
And I could see something as limiting, or I could see freedom in that same exact thing. So it's like it's up to me ultimately. So what happens when a lot of people change like something as heavy as like a belief system that runs their entire operating system, it's so easy to turn around and like have bitterness towards that, or feel rejected, or all these different like negative things that you can and do feel, and you go through a process of that. But ultimately it's up to you on how you see that, and it doesn't have to be that way at all. And so the people around you, like when you can feel confident in where you're going in life, and you're like, like this feels good to me, despite what people around me are saying, I'm confident in this, then why would you feel any malice towards those around you for doing that too, for believing in what they believe in? Like if we're around Utah and everyone, the demographic is just heavily, or I don't know what I'm saying, but yeah, there's Mormons everywhere.
Yeah.
Why is that a negative thing to you, right? Why does that have to be a negative thing? It can be something where you are okay with them doing what they do, just as you're okay with you doing what you do.
Mhm.
And if they're not okay with that, that's not your problem. Like
Mhm.
that's the kind of the perspective that I kind of tried to adopt, I guess. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's really valuable. There's a few things that come up for me, and I think for a lot of people that have experienced, significant like trauma or distress, and they're kind of going through their deconstruction, it is difficult to do. But I'm actually with you. I think that having this type of middle ground perspective is very important to healing, to reconstructing. And I don't think it just applies here in Utah. Obviously, like we're talking about Utah culture and there being a lot of Mormons, but I think this generalizes to anywhere you live, right? Or there's hard things no matter where you're
Right.
at, right? And people go through hard things in their life, but it's deciding how you want to show up in the world, and what do you want to take personal, and what do you want to recognize that's not yours.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
you can't control. And I'm as I'm saying this to you, I mean, this is what I feel too. I can't control that the predominant culture where I live is Mormon. Right.
Mhm.
But I can control how I show up in that culture, and
Mhm.
how I interact with people, and what I teach my kids. And I think that's very empowering, and that could be true no matter where I live. And there would be different things if I lived in a place that was more diverse, but there would also be hard things in that too. I think
Mhm.
Utah as a whole, I mean, especially small town Utah, is very safe. It's a very safe place to raise a family, and you're not going to get that in other areas. You're just
Yeah.
not. I've lived other places, right, outside of Utah. So I think it's important to embody that, and I think it's something I've been really diving into and exploring, because there are days where I just want to get out. I want to leave. I mean, I said that to you guys when I walked in here. And I've been coming back to the place of why Why do I want to leave?
Mhm.
You know, and there's hard things everywhere. And my husband says this to me all the time. He's like, Monday through Friday look the same, no matter where you live.
Yeah, that's
Right.
good.
Essentially. And so who is my home and who do I want to be with? It's my husband and my kids.
Mhm.
And it honestly doesn't matter where we live. Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you get to make it what you want to make it. And I think this is an important thing to talk about because I know a lot of people listening, especially if they're deconstructing their faith, have a lot of bitterness towards the church. And I see that and I validate it
Mhm.
and I respect it. And I also I think one thing I've really been holding space for is I can't in good faith say the church is all bad. Like I could not say that to you.
Right. And I think that it is important to recognize that that is a phase to go through. Like there's even comments that you see all the time, I'm sure, that say it's like, "Oh, here you are. You leave the church, but you don't leave the church alone." And it's like that's just a lack of understanding where other people are at because you've never gone there. And what's interesting about being part of that world and then not part of that world is you can see there's just a broader perspective, right? And if you're saying something like that, you're failing to understand someone else's experience. And we do that all the time. It doesn't have to just do with that. But it's worth noting that, the more that it if I'm, I can't hold space for just where I'm at. Like I have to also recognize that there are people finding good in that still too. And it's like if I'm outside of that now and I fail to realize that, even if I don't agree with it or believe in it, then it's like I'm just as guilty as kind of a comment like that, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that's a really important perspective
Yeah.
to put out because it shows up on both sides. And I think that in doing so much religious trauma work, that just fell into my lap. I wasn't intentionally seeking it out, obviously, but I have so much compassion and empathy for members of the church.
Mhm.
And I know people don't perceive that of me because I'm talking openly about the harm and the distress that does happen. But I have so much compassion for true believing members because I understand why they believe,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
And me to tell them that they're wrong or that they're believing in something that only causes harm is me perpetrating that exact same comment that's being said to me.
Yeah.
Right. And so but I do think the nuance and that middle ground showing up in the world in which you do, right? Where you're like, I'm not suffocated anymore. I think that's really hard to do.
Yeah, it is. But I feel like it's like it's a process too. It's not like
Yes.
I'm perfect or it's like we don't do things perfectly. So again, leaving a religion that you were raised in or whatever, something that's been part of your identity for so long, that's hard. So people need to recognize that that's hard and no, it's not, it's not hard because, oh, they're leaving the right thing. Like they're like leaving God and they're leaving truth and like all these different things that we hear all the time. It's like, no, it's not that. It's hard because you're leaving something that you're familiar with, something you've identified with your whole life. And let's have compassion for that. That's hard. I'm not saying that you have to do it too, right? Like that you have to leave it too, but it is hard for those people that do it. And most of the time, they're doing it because they're following what feels right to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the truth of the matter is we're not all supposed to do the same thing, believe the same things, be the same person. There's a different path for everybody. And ultimately we learn the lessons that we walk through. And so I think that there's value in all of that. And there's also, but it's so hard to not turn around and feel like we were talking about earlier is feel like bitterness or anger towards that. And then so you have this process where you go through, you leave the church and then you turn around and you see everything that's wrong with it or that's wrong with even how you're being treated after leaving the church.
Mm-hmm.
That can be hard too. So it's hard to not turn around and make that part of I don't know, there's just so much there. It's so dense. And so it's so hard to know how to navigate life because now your belief system's gone. Your support system oftentimes is gone as well. So how do you now navigate, the grounding there? It's so hard to figure out your footing in the world. And so I like to say that leave the church, but you don't leave the church alone kind of comment. But it's like, okay, let's have compassion for those people that need to go through that process and they maybe need to let out that anger, that bitterness, whatever. But my whole thing is the mistakes I've made too. It's like there's healthy ways to do that. There's healthy ways to go about it, and you don't have to feel suffocated, and you don't have to feel not supported. Like there is so much out there that you can do with your perspective, and that's kind of how I feel about the whole thing. Is you can healthily do that even when people around you don't agree with you,
Yeah.
and you can trust your heart and move forward with that.
I'm curious, did you ever, because I agree with you. I think the like bitterness,
Mm,
anger phase is such a real part of
yeah.
the deconstruction. I also see a lot of people get stuck there, because I think it's easier in a lot of ways to be angry and bitter than it is to kind of come back to like finding the more middle ground, the grace, the compassion,
Hmm.
all of that. Did you ever feel like you got stuck, or how long did you exist in that space? And was there one thing or multiple things that brought you out of it? I'm just curious.
I'm curious too, actually, because it's so funny that we're even talking about this stuff, because I feel like it's not my focus. Like it's not
Yeah.
something that I live in at all,
Yeah. Okay. It
but
just,
I have.
yeah.
But it's so funny to revisit in this conversation because again, this isn't my focus. Like I don't find a need to like be talking about like this all the time because
Yeah.
it's not part of my day to day anymore. But it was, and so there was a phase of that, and I think that's why I said what I just said about, sometimes we do need a. It's hard to find your footing in the world,
Yeah.
but it's a process of finding who you are, and it's like self discovery. And so even when what you knew is no longer part of you, and even when the people around you might not support what you're doing and you feel lost in that, I like to say that that's a good thing almost, because it pushes you to do what feels right to you
Hmm.
despite anything around you, and then you find out who you are more, and then you can find your footing and you find your path a little more, and it's not someone else's, and it's not what you thought it'd be, but it is what's right for you, and it feels, and you know that. And when you know that deep down, it doesn't matter if you're in a state where everyone around you is believing something, or your family or your friends or whatever don't believe in what you're doing, because you do, and you're good with that, and you don't need them to do that. So but I did have that phase that you're talking about, and I don't know if there was anything in particular that kind of got me out of that besides just going through the process of it, and then
Yeah.
coming out the other end and having the perspective that I just mentioned, and honoring that, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking too, like, I talk a lot about in like brain spotting, like riding the wave of activation. And that's kind of what's coming up for me is like you rode the wave of the whole process, right? You kind of just let each part happen
Yeah.
and then you came out on the other side. And what I really want to convey to people listening is like, especially if you're going through the deconstruction process, especially if you're finding yourself in that bitter, angry phase, like it to hold space for it, it will pass. And you get to a place like Carson where you're like, I don't even think about it anymore.
Hmm.
Right? It's not even a part of my life at all. And I just get to exist and live in Utah and it doesn't even like bug me.
Yeah.
Right. And and I think that in a lot of ways you model what it means to like let it all happen and to feel it all and move through it all. And then it doesn't have to be in charge anymore.
No, because ultimately, like, you don't need any validation to do what's right for you.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need, even if there's pressure and a culture or your family or your friends or whatever, it's like, why do you need
Hmm.
their permission? Like, so if you know what's right for you and you feel that so deeply, and you're the way you move through the world is confident in that space, who cares? Like,
Hmm.
ask yourself that. And that's like kind of maybe what I had to do, is like get through all of that. Cause it's like, it's not like I didn't have to get through all that, and now I have this mindset. It's like, no, like I didn't have this mindset. So I had to push through that and figure that out for myself. And then once you're there, it doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't matter. Even if it's the ones closest to you, like how do you want to be in the world? And like, can you love parts of them and as they love parts of you? Or if they're not supporting you, it's like, can you still show up and not let that bother you?
Which I think is an incredibly hard thing to do. And I
Hmm.
also think it's really healing. And I think about when, as we heal or we shift, right, how we feel in our own being, then we show up differently in the world and that
Sure.
impacts the environment. And so I think, I think you're really offering an important perspective, especially for people who have family members that are still members of the church, which I'm assuming you
Mhm.
have.
Yeah.
And how you show up in those relationships and how you present yourself is impacting the environment, is impacting their brain, even unconsciously, right? Because if you can show up with love and patience and kindness and also take breaks and space and boundaries, you're staying centered in you, they are receiving that healing. Like
Mhm.
they get it through the environment in which you create. And I think that's really powerful. So you can't change your parents, you can't change the way people respond to you. But by you responding to them in a way that is more productive and healthy and supportive to your own being,
Mhm.
you do impact their brain.
Yeah, I mean, if you show up loving regardless,
Yes.
and of course, you brought up something really important is boundaries, but you don't understand or know your boundaries unless you know where you're at in life and know what you need and don't need. So when people cross your boundaries, it's, you can feel that and you go, "Oh, maybe I don't interact with this part of this person." But like you can still engage with people in loving ways and not engage with certain aspects of that, right? Where it's like
Mhm.
there's no obligation to do that. And so you can still be a loving, kind person and believe in what you believe and do what you need to do in life and interact kindly with the people that like you disagree with. And that's not just with religion or belief. It's like we have a problem in the world with needing everybody to like validate our experience and like what we believe and our opinions about whatever. And if you don't, then I cut you off and all these different things. It's like the truth of the matter is none of us agree 100% on anything. Like there's infinite ways that we disagree with each other. And we gather in communities and we have friends and we have people that we resonate with because there's certain aspects of them that we resonate with. But I guarantee on deeper and deeper levels, there's things that you really, really disagree with that person. What if you met them at that place instead of the thing that you agreed with, right? So whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whatever, we have an issue with needing like everyone to like feel how we feel, and that's not the case. Like
Yeah.
that's not the case at all.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate I we've had a couple conversations about this and we talked about it and I remember I felt really comfortable to talk about like when the election was happening with you and just like the chaos in
Mm,
the world. But how I've perceived so much of that, especially in working, like specializing, I guess, in high control religion over the last few years, is it felt like everything you're talking about, right? Everyone needing to agree, everyone needing to be on the same
mhm.
page felt very much like high control
Yeah,
religion in
yeah,
general on every side of the spectrum. And to witness it from that lens, I was like, whew, it like allowed me to zoom out and step out and be like, I don't want to participate. I
mhm.
don't want to participate in any of this because it's not in alignment on any side. Like no person, no political party, no religion, in my opinion, has one right true answer. And we have to be really conscientious as human beings not to get
Yeah,
trapped into that. And it's really easy, I think, when you grew up in a high control group to then find another high control group that reinforces those same things within your nervous system.
yeah. It's not productive at all, and I feel like you just like that happens a lot where you identify with some group, and then maybe you basically can jump easily to doing the exact same thing somewhere else.
Mhm.
And a lot of the times, like again, just being in Utah and Mormonism and whatever, it's like you do the Mormon to ex-Mormon thing, and they're just as dogmatic.
Yep.
You can be just as dogmatic in or out. And so it's so interesting. But I'm a big, this might sound random, but I'm a big like music guy, concert. I love concerts and whatever. And it just, what we were talking about made me think of, you're at a concert and listening, you're all listening, focusing on this artist that you all love. You're feeling the music and everything. Everyone in that place, it's like different political beliefs, different religions, different ideas, different so many different things. If you met them at the place that you're so identified with a specific opinion or a belief or your religion that the second you know that someone else is on the other side of that and you're so identified with that and you meet them in that place that you just disregard them. It's like, why do we do that? Why can't it be like a concert where you go in and you're all together and it's like, man, this is so harmonious. Like we're chilling, listening to our favorite artist. you're on this side, you're on this side. Like that's actually what's happening, but we don't pay attention to that in those spaces. So that's why I really enjoy those spaces. And I think that we can create those spaces anywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. It makes me think so when I first became a therapist in San Diego, when you go to graduate school, at least the graduate school I went to, was like they really pushed self-care and you need to find things to take care of yourself.
Hmm.
And so once I got my first job, I knew I had income, I signed up to go take classes at a bar studio. And it was the exact same thing. Like all of these women working out together in the same space, but we were all completely different. Yet we were all there and we had community, right? And yes, were we different? We have different political beliefs, tastes in music, like all of that, religion, but none of it mattered. Just in the same way you're saying going to a concert doesn't matter.
Hmm.
There's this collective energy, and I think the world absolutely needs more of that. I think Utah needs more of that
Sure.
on both sides of like the Mormon, ex-Mormon space, right? Like how do we create more harmony? And I think it starts by having open, honest conversations.
Which is hard for people these days to even do.
It's so hard. And I think on both sides of the spectrum,
Sure.
I think it's really hard. And I've been really leaning into, especially for me personally, that I'm really hard to hate up close. Like people can hate me from afar and they can send me really mean messages online. But if you actually sit down and have a conversation with me, I'm really hard to hate.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you believe,
Well, their idea of you is not real. It's not you.
Yeah.
They just throw something at you of what they perceive online. And then, but like you said, if you actually are like in the space, and that's most people.
Exactly.
I feel like that's most people. Like at least the people I meet, it's like you can do that. You can make an idea and like have you envision something about that person, but it's not truly who they are.
No. And one of the things that I've been doing to kind of, and I don't always have the capacity to do this because I am busy, but
Mhm.
sometimes when I get a hate or like and from someone that has a perceived bigger following, sometimes I will be like, hey, I'm open to a conversation.
Mhm.
And I will audio message them. And the two people I've done it with like have ceased to engage with me. They don't like continue to hate me because they now know me. They know who I am and what I'm about. And I'm really not anti anything,
Mhm.
including their church. And I think for me, it's been a really cool experience and a reminder to embody that when I can and when I have the capacity to. And I'm not saying like not everyone deserves our time and our attention, right? I'm really smart and intentional about who I engage with, but allowing space for those conversations is really important too, because I'm talking about the harm of the church, but if I'm not willing to talk to someone who's a true believing member, I'm again part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's being open and curious to those conversations. And I think it's really hard to do. I think about like what allows me to do it. And I think I'm similar to you. Like none of this stuff really bugs me. It does now because I see so much trauma.
You're so deeply involved.
Yeah,
with it.
I see so much trauma every week in my office, but it's like Mormonism has no like influence on my life aside from work. Like that's it. That's the only place I'm even thinking about the church, right? My personal life, my family life, all my friends, like it's completely removed from me. And I think that's why I can show up the way I show up online. Like I think that's why I have the capacity to have these conversations with people or to deal with the hate and all the comments, because I'm like, you guys really, you're not impacting me. Like this has no merit on who I am as a person. I know who I am. I'm very solid in who I am as a person. And I think that is where we have to go in order to show up in the world that way. It starts with us, right? It's like you're saying you have to feel confident on the ground you stand on and who you are. You have to give that energy to yourself in order to let go of what your family members think.
Absolutely, yeah. But it's like if you don't have that, it's so easy to get carried away on someone else's like game, I guess. I don't know how to say it. Like it's so easy to just lose yourself. Especially if it's high control or if it's everywhere around. It's like if you don't have that for yourself, if you're not anchored somewhere, it's so easy to, I guess, just get carried away.
Yeah, and the biggest criticism I get from people is that I am telling people to leave their religion. And I actually never do that ever.
Yeah, I've never heard you say that.
Never. And if you work with me, like if I have a client come in and they're like, I'm really struggling. I don't know what to do. Like I have clients that come in and they're like, I don't know if I want to stay married. I don't know if I want to stay a member of the church. Do you know where I always start with them?
What's that?
There's their relationship with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's get to know you. Like, let's spend time exploring your own stuff happening inside your being. Let's start there and see what happens. Because that is the foundation to make all of the choices that you want to make in your life. Right? And I want my clients to feel empowered to make choices that are in alignment with them. And that might mean that they stay in their faith.
Yeah.
And I have no judgment or criticism.
And you're
of
not,
that.
yeah, and you're not in charge of like making that decision. And that's
No.
actually how you know you can trust the people you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one thing you see, like people hijacking others in like religion, cults, and whatever, is someone that's not pointing you back inward.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's dictating those kind of decisions for you or manipulating those kind of decisions for you, you can know that something's off there, because they're ultimately, it is an inward journey. And so the people that, facilitate, self-help or, spirituality or whatever it might be, if they are constantly pointing you back inward, that's so much more aligned, because they're not trying to get you to be or do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're helping direct you back to where you'll find all the answers anyways. You're not going to find them out there. It's always an inward journey. So,
Well, I actually I really appreciate you saying that. And I don't know, like, oh yeah, that is absolutely what I do, but I don't know if I've ever communicated it in that way or gave that guidance in seeking out support, right?
mm-hmm.
Because you're exactly right. If you're seeking support in any space, whether that's therapy, religion, yoga, I mean, anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and it's communicating that it needs to happen externally, be wary of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really powerful thing to remember and think about when you're seeking support.
Yeah. And oftentimes it's like, back to kind of earlier when we were talking about, paradigm shifts and finding your footing in the world again. It's so easy to maybe find a new belief system or a modality that maybe resonates a little bit, but it's not the right environment. And that's not to say that those modalities don't serve a purpose or help. But if you don't have some sort of like self-awareness to recognize when someone's kind of being manipulative, it could be a yoga space, it could be a this, it could be that, whatever it is. It's like, that's why it's so important to recognize what, your practice should always be going inward. And if someone else is kind of like directing you to do that, then they could be a really great facilitator for that, or a great therapist, a great spiritual leader, religion, whatever it might be. So it's just important to recognize that, when you're starting fresh and you kind of clean the slate and or with a clean slate and you're trying to figure out who you are, it's really important to recognize that aspect, or you could be carried into, just something that's not going to serve you ultimately in the end.
Yeah. What do you do to go inward? Like what practices or things, and maybe that's shifted and evolved over time?
Yeah, I think it always is, right?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I think I've found interest in a lot of different things that, I'm a very curious person. And so I really enjoy studying religion. Like I love to like find similarities across the board. I like to like find, different belief systems interesting. I want to talk to everybody. That it's like, what do you believe in? Like, what do you, I find it there often.
Mm-hmm.
I think any form of meditation, and whether that's a formal practice or just your own, but being, that the buzzword mindful, whatever, like finding your version of like every day to day, like you can find some sort of space that you are inviting that in is the most important, whatever that looks like. And that'll be different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You can call it prayer, meditation, snowboarding, skateboarding, playing your guitar, your therapy, your whatever. It's like you can find that anywhere. And I'm just saying all that to point out that, like, even someone like out there gardening might be in this like space that I'm talking about, and that's their version of it. So how dare I tell them that they can't, that's not how you do it, right? And so I feel like, yeah, just I try to find that for me, whatever that looks like, and that changes all the time
Yeah,
as I do.
yeah, I really love that. And I'm thinking about something that I recently like took in during a brain spotting training, which is there's no wrong ways, there's just different ways.
Hmm.
And we as a society, and then, especially if there's like a high control element to it, but just in general have decided that these are the right ways and these are the wrong ways. And I think that is so problematic because it's also so black
It's
and
so
white.
limited.
It is. It's so limited because all of the things you just mentioned are incredibly healing and powerful.
Mhm.
And I think one of my trauma responses, if you want to call it, has been like being black and white or like this is the right way to do it. I've actually seen a lot of the perfectionism show up in the production of this podcast, as you know. But the more I can free myself of that, and even in my own healing, like when I allowed myself to be open and curious about all different types of modalities, whether that's therapy, right? Obviously I'm a therapist. I do brain spotting therapy. I'm a huge proponent for that, but that's not the end all be all.
Mhm.
I've had really incredible healing moments teaching exercise classes or teaching movement classes and in a yoga class or going on a hike or hanging out with my kids. And just the other day I was, so I used to run all the time. When I was 22, I ran a marathon, and
Oh, cool.
I never ran more than 3 miles since then because it took a toll. It was a lot, but running to me was always just like a way to let everything out, to work through thoughts, feelings. It was a meditative practice. And for some reason, when I moved to Utah, I stopped running. And I don't know if it was like the elevation change because I was in California, but I stopped running, and then I had kids and I stopped running. I was still moving, but I recently in the last year have started to run a little bit more and do interval work. And on Sunday, it was like fairly warm, and I decided to go outside. I told my husband, I was like, I'm going to go outside and go for a run and just put my music on. It was the first time I'd ran 3 miles like nonstop in years. And I had this moment of like, this is better than my therapy session sometimes. Like this is so powerful and so healing just to be with my body
Mhm.
for 30 minutes, exerting it. And I don't need to do anything else to feel content in my life,
Mhm.
right? Or to know that I'm good enough or worthy or whatever it is. And I really invite people that feel stuck or unable to like move through stuff, like, can you be open to a bunch of different things? Can you try a bunch of different things and get really
Yeah.
uncomfortable, right? And I love what you said about snowboarding or skateboarding. Like those are ways to take care of yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I grew up skateboarding, and the older I've gotten, the more I realize how much that did for me in ways I had no idea. But also recognizing what you're saying, where it's like people are finding their version of that in so many different places. And the funny thing is we find that in so many different places too. And sometimes like, we dabble and then it doesn't work out. And then it's okay to have different interests, and it's okay to like lean into something and then realize, oh, it served its purpose or whatever. And you can drop things as you go. Like you don't have to, like, it's so funny because we like to like grab onto something and then I identify with it. And it's like, this is my thing now. And especially leaving like a high control religion or something like that. It's like, you want to like jump into like, oh, I need to label a belief system now. And it's like, it's okay to explore. Like, that's what we're here for. It's okay to lean into your interests, your curiosities, and then let them go as they need to be. Like they can serve a purpose, and then they can no longer, you don't have to carry them anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that that's so fun, and that's so like the exploration is part of the journey. And it's funny that we want to box everything into something. And I think that it's worthwhile to create the mindset or cultivate the mindset of there's so much available to explore. And I always like to tell people to like lean into your interests, and wherever they take you, let them carry you into new places. And that doesn't mean that you have to do that, this, or the other. It could totally transform into something you might not even realize, and then you really find yourself there. And then you ride that for a long time, and then maybe that goes away too, and that's totally okay as well.
Absolutely. What you're making me think of, like when I start with working with clients and we're working on creating some resources or things for them to lean on as they
Yeah.
struggle, I always start with what they're already doing, what's already coming natural to
Mm-hmm.
them. And sometimes it's just like helping them shift how they see those things. Like sometimes just taking care of yourself, the basic necessities of food, water,
Start there.
shower, like that is significant. And if you can hold space for that and recognize the significance of that, that can be a really solid place to start because it shifts the way, like the mundane things or the things you have to do to survive. Well, if you don't do them, you don't survive.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you just be more intentional and mindful of like, oh yeah, I'm choosing to drink water today. Like that is taking care of yourself,
Oh, 100%. And like, even if like, unfortunately, like people go through like really dark periods where it's a very long time of like whatever they're going through. And even when you're in those spaces, like you can find one thing that takes you out of that and maybe prioritize that a little more. At least just start there. Like drink water, or if you find bliss in a hike or go walking more or whatever it ends up being for you, read books, whatever. Like when you're in those spaces, maybe try to create them more in your life. And the more that you do that over a prolonged period of time, the more you realize that your days are kind of like taking you into a different space more and more and more because you're doing that. Like we all have the power to do that to a certain extent. So
absolutely. And I also really liked what you were talking a lot about in regards to curiosity and being curious. Actually, I say that word so often in my therapy sessions. It's kind of like the guiding premise behind brain spotting. So it's like, oh, what do you notice in your body? Be curious about that. And what curiosity does is it softens, it takes away judgment. And can we just be curious about the thing? So like if you're listening, you're like, well, there's nothing that makes me feel good. Okay. Just notice that. Can you be curious about that?
That's good.
Can you sit with why is there nothing that makes you feel good? Let's be open to exploring that. And I have found, and as I do this more with myself, actually just the other night I was, and you and I had a conversation about this on Thursday, but that Wednesday night I was like, yeah, I'm not doing the podcast anymore. I was telling my husband I can't do the podcast. I don't know. It's like too much. I'm too stressed out. Like have too much on my plate. Right. And it was before bed and I was sharing these things. And then I lay down and I closed my eyes and I noticed I kind of had a headache. And so I just kind of went into my own nervous system and got curious about why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And it turns out it had nothing to do with the podcast. I think there is like a little bit of like, redefining what that looks, but I was actually pretty anxious about leaving my kids for the weekend. And when I kind of giggled to myself after I made that connection, I'm like, yeah, because the podcast feels controllable. Like I can choose how I'm going to do the podcast. Like I can decide to be done with it, right? Like I can't always control that I feel anxious to leave my kids when I leave. But the curiosity allowed me to get there. And had I not got curious, I might have talked to you on Thursday and been like, we're done. I can't do this anymore. Right. And I would have made an impulsive decision instead of an intuitive decision. And I think curiosity allows us to get to know our intuition, especially when it's been stripped of us for a lot of different reasons, trauma, high control religion. Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah. Yeah, that's big. I feel like we do that a lot and we kind of jump the gun a lot too, like because we want to feel in control of things,
yes.
but if we could be curious, if we could shift it into that curiosity instead of the control more, it's like even tomorrow, like we don't know.
Exactly.
Like we create routines of like how we live life and how we expect life to be, but that's not the case actually. Even if we have like some sort of structure to it, it's like we can have expectations, but ultimately like tomorrow's unknown. So like being curious about that more and more, I feel like you could turn it into a playful thing too. Like it doesn't have to be stressful, right? I don't know if that pertains exactly to what you're saying, but
exactly. No, I think that's exactly it. And I actually feel that all the time. And I would say that's been the gift of doing so much brain spotting sessions for myself and regulating myself is I often will have that thought, like, I don't know if tomorrow is going to happen. And that used to terrify me. Like that's a scary thing to think, or it used to be. And now as soon as I feel that, it's just like, okay, then I'm going to be really present right now in the here and now in whatever situation I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's really, really powerful. And I think even when, the other night when I was having those thoughts and I was saying that to my husband, and then I made that connection, I woke up the next morning and I was like, I actually don't think I need to be done with the podcast or whatever. But then when I brought the conversation to you and I didn't just make a rigid decision, you were like, well, we can pivot it. Like, you can shift it. You don't have to do it every week. Like, there's options here. And because I was like too in my activation or too like rigid, I wasn't even holding space for those options. It was like, oh, nope, we have to do it like this. And this is the structure and this is the way we do it. And that is so limiting.
Yeah.
And I think as people, we do that a lot. And so again, that curiosity piece allowed me to have like a completely different perspective on what does sunflower movement get to be, and I get to choose what it gets to be, and there's no wrong way for it to exist.
Yeah, and it's such a process. It's like it's turning into what it's turning into. Like
exactly.
And that's us as people too. What's funny is like a lot of the time we're always trying to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And like back to like what you were saying about like just drinking water or just whatever. It's like I like to remind people like it's okay to just be where you're at. Like you don't have to be like rushing to some like healed version of yourself necessarily. It's like just like where are you and what can you do right now, and maybe cultivate the mindset of being okay with that to start. Like it's like where I'm at is perfect. It's okay. Like despite everything, whatever, it's like let's work with that. Like it's okay. And then do what you can with what's available to you. And start there. And ultimately, I think that kind of like, moves you in a different direction and kind of takes you down some sort of path that you're meant for. But like often we're, especially in like people that are interested in like self-growth or healing, like the healing communities. And often there is that kind of rush to like, or like that jump the gun mentality, or it's like, oh, this works. Like this work. I'm just going to go full send into this. And it's like, maybe like, I'm not going to say that's not what you're supposed to do, but sometimes we forget that it is okay to, like you said, be here right now with what's available and where I'm at, and work with that and be patient too. And like work with it. It's like, oh, like, and again, I like the idea of playfulness a lot, where it's like, instead of taking everything so seriously and we're so strict with ourselves, what's available, where am I, what am I working with, and play with that more so. I like that idea. I at least feel like that helps me, where it's like turning life into play, and curiosity is play to me.
Absolutely.
So,
well, and I mean, what's coming up for me as you say that is I think about kids and being playful, and kids are so incredibly curious. I think about my two kids, like they're so curious. They have all these questions.
We lose that.
We do. We lose that for a lot of reasons. And can we tap back into that? And it's such a process. And I would say and I am obviously like, I believe in healing. I believe in healing journeys. Obviously, that's what I do for work. But even for myself, exactly what you're talking about, when I stopped being like, okay, I have to go brain spot, I have to figure this all out. And I just kind of let healing look like not knowing the answer. Like let being able to be uncertain. That was so freeing for me.
Yeah.
Right.
But you're still supported by brain spotting or whatever we're working with, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I love that. Like it's because there is this whole idea, like and I have this with clients all the time, like I just need to get fixed. I need to get better. And I often say, I actually think you already are, like we have to hold space for the here and now in order to feel better. And sometimes feeling better is learning how to feel okay with feeling dysregulated or uncertain or stressed or anxious, and I love all of that. And it's interesting because I'm sitting here like thinking about, I feel like, I don't know, Carson, you can tell me your perception of this, but as I said earlier, doing the podcast is completely uncharted territory for me and nothing like I've ever done before. And it has brought up more activation for me than I've experienced in a while. And normally, like, and I think there has been, obviously, because I'm human, some judgment and shame around that.
Mm-hmm.
But how I hold space for that now is like, okay, well, these are just opportunities for my own like healing and exploration. And it's so funny because every time I feel activated or I dive in about the podcast, it is never about the podcast. It's always about like wounds or like perfectionism and am I good enough, right? Like deeper things. But it's been such a reminder for me that sometimes when we do new things and we make a lot of mistakes or what we perceive to be mistakes is there's a lot of shame there. And so
Mm-hmm.
while those things are scary and hard and uncomfortable, like I'm so grateful that I've decided to do this because it's made me dive into my own being and like be more open and curious.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, like, what has it been like on your end? Because I feel like I have been in a more like my interactions with you, I would say I've been more in a stressed state than like this conversation right now because it's been stressful for me. So I'm curious your perception of that. If you felt that at all.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't even feel like that to me. I feel like it's more, well, how I see everything. Like, it's a vehicle for you to like explore yourself, anyway.
Yeah.
So, like Sunflower Movement. So the podcast itself, it's like that is what it looks like.
True.
So to me, it's not. It's not that you're coming at it with more stress or it's just like that's kind of what it is. It's like you have to be open to the pivots and the transformations and this will always be the case. And it's like whether it's business, your own self-growth, a podcast or whatever, it's just like it is that same vehicle for that's how I see it anyways. And so it's an exploration anyways. Like it's always going to kind of be changing. So I would have never said that. It's like, yeah, I wouldn't have seen it like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that I actually am like, okay, Carson.
It'll always change, right?
It will. And I think I actually really appreciate you reflecting that back to me. And I think that's why I appreciate working with you so much. And I'm thinking about what I like define Sunflower Movement to be, like the moments where we feel seen, heard, and believed. And I think you always embody that for me.
Good.
when I'm like in one of those states or I'm freaking out or I don't like something or like, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what Sunflower Movement is. And it's so full circle that you're the person helping me produce it. So
I love that. And it's something I really believe in too, where it's like back to earlier when we were talking about often we're not open to or we're not open to seeing others, hearing others. Like so many times we're just listening to respond to people and we're identified with everything about it, like we talked about earlier, and like the second it's like agitates me, it's like I already reject you, and it's like we're not doing that. So it's like I really believe in like the idea of Sunflower Movement and the essence of it, because it's like we need to do that more. It's like we don't need to agree with everybody, but why can't we listen, and why can't we be curious? And why, if I disagree with you, does that have to equate to like writing you off? Or like, why can't I be curious about why I disagree with you and hold space for that? So I love that you're creating like a vehicle for that space and like the essence of that whole mentality, because it's very important today, because we're getting a lot of at least how I see it, that's very active these days, like socially.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
I think it's more important. You can have your values, you can have your beliefs, your morals, everything, and confidently walk with those. And at the same time, be curious about someone else's, even when they're polar opposites to you. Like, why? How does that exist? Like, what's that about? Maybe you'll learn something by leaning into that. And there's no obligation to adopt theirs. You can keep yours. That's cool. Like, own that, move with that, hold on to your values, and listen to someone else's. Like, that's all I like. I like to like really lean into that. And so I feel like a lot of like what you're building here is like, at least that's contained there too. So I really like appreciate that.
I appreciate you saying all that. Thank you. It's I think we don't always see ourselves, or we don't always see what we're doing. because we're caught up in the stress of it.
Yeah, there's so much chaos out there.
And like putting it out there, quote unquote, perfectly. So I really appreciate that reflection back. And I also was sitting here thinking that I feel like you're very wise, and I'm very curious. I've never even asked you how old you are, or like I was curious how old you were when you went on your mission.
How old do you think I am?
I don't know. I would say like 30. I don't know.
Yeah, it's close. I'm 33.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I went on my mission in 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's when I graduated college.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got back in 2012.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then you left shortly after. You left the church shortly after that.
Yeah, shortly after that. And
was it your mission that like provoked that? I'm curious.
not necessarily, but you know, I think that I wasn't. It was just I think I just kind of got like swept. Like I feel like it was more of like
this is just what you do.
A journey. Like I didn't really like. Oh, this is these decisions. It's like so much of my life. It's so funny when people ask questions like this because so much of my life it feels like I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like it's just kind of like I feel like life kind of takes you places, and you learn things along the way, and I kind of lean into that. And so it's kind of like hard to like sometimes really pinpoint specifics a lot of the times.
I actually really, really resonate with what you're saying. And I said that I talked about to a like teenage client about this this week about, they're like, oh, I need to have my life mapped out and I'll figure it out. And I said, well, like you kind of already have some plans. And let's just let those be okay, because you're going to get to that stage and you're going to do that thing. And then you're probably going to pivot to something else.
It's probably not going to look like how you thought it did anyways.
Exactly. And I mean, I think about that even for myself. And that's how I kind of view quote unquote goals in general is you set a goal and then you just let it go from there. Because when I started college, I did not expect to be a therapist. I did not expect to ever be sitting here one day.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the starting college that got me here. Yeah.
But you had a goal and you were walking towards it.
Yeah, but it changed.
But pieces to the puzzle kind of come your way. And like, again, that doesn't have to be stressful. It can be fun. Mm-hmm. Like when life kind of happens for you, I guess it's probably cliche to say like life happening to you versus happening for you. Like that mentality of like, oh, cool. Like what's next? Like, but you have like these goals and these ideas and these, again, values and whatever. It's like, you can create all that and carry that with you, but also being open to like the doors that open as you move through that. And, like you had your goals and you kind of like things happen and you pivot. And like, again, everything's a vehicle for that. Even the podcasts or whatever projects you're working on or whatever career your career path you're on or your life journey. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I'm thinking a lot too that I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways of my own personal healing is that I get to look back at all the things in my life and view them from that lens. And that also includes Mormonism for me. And I think for a long time I rejected it because I wasn't living in Utah and I was done with that, right? But I never, in the way that I do now, I never like acknowledged like how much it did influence and impact.
Oh, sure.
There's no way I could be sitting here if I didn't have that experience. I think about all the clients I hold space for, all the clients that seek me out because of my knowledge and experience of Mormonism. Mm-hmm. And I can't hate that.
No, it's part of accepting that made you too.
Yeah. And it also like, it like allows me to show up today. And it also, one really cool part for me has been like, I have Mormon ancestors. I have Mormon lineage. Also, like I get to be the first woman in my like, maternal lineage, like in my immediate family that has broken the cycle. And my mom's not an active member and my grandma isn't, but like they still bear the wounds of it so deeply, And so in a lot of ways, it's like I'm doing what they never could have, or like, my female ancestors could never have done. And I get to do that in the here and now. And that's only been paved way because of this religion,
That's powerful.
And if you would have asked me when I left the church or when I had my records removed in 2012 that I would ever be able to like say that, I would have said you're crazy.
Really?
Because I I was in that bitterness stage, even though I wouldn't have labeled it at that time because I was so far removed, but I hated it so much. I hated it that this was my history, my identity. And I was never a good enough Mormon, and I'm not a good enough ex-Mormon. So I just don't want to be any of it, but it's a part of me and I can't change it. And so having to hold space for that
versus rejecting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's huge. And again, like I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you. Sunflower Movement wouldn't exist. I wouldn't have the platform I do without it. So I can't hate it.
That's so huge. Because it's like, it's all a matter of like trusting what's happening, like trusting like all your story kind of, right?
Yes.
And it's like, why would you reject any part of it where it's like, you would not be who you are and where you are in life without the details of it that are making you up to where you are today. And that's why it's important to like, I guess, realize that. And then as you're moving through life and growing, then the doors that are opening for you, you can kind of do that in the here and now versus like turning around and like learning, rejecting different things and learning that along the way. It's like you can start to like navigate from that space as those opportunities are coming to you, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel
because you're accepting it, right?
Yeah. And I feel really intentional and present and invested in things in my life more so than I ever had prior to doing a lot of my own healing. And even like college, I used to have this like perception of college that I was a mess and a wreck and like all of this stuff. And honestly, college saved my life. Like college shifted the trajectory of my life. The friends I made in college are still my friends to this day. And I didn't get to love them then. How I love them now. And it's so powerful to be like, oh, I'm just so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for what you gave me when I was 18 to 22 years old. And I get to embody it even more in the here and now. And I think my takeaway from that and what I want people to realize is that the things that I thought were the darkest parts of my life are now the parts that have given me the most fulfillment and joy and clarity for the here and now.
Yeah, and I would say too, it's like I would bet you'd agree with this, is a lot of that stuff is what helps you turn around and offer service to those around you as well, with the insights and the wisdom that you probably carry from those times, right? Like if you didn't have that, you wouldn't also have like the insight to provide, I guess. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like sometimes our greatest even failures or mistakes or the dark times of our life, it's like later when that's processed, that's actually part of your gifts, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I look forward to being like 5 years down the road and seeing all the gifts on Sunflower Movement.
Yeah.
All of my hard days. I'm just joking.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No, I already see them, and I think, but this is like such a really important reminder too for the here and now, that if things feel hard or scary or stressful or uncertain, what do I get on the like other end of that, right? That full wave of completing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really cool way to look at life, that like this is temporary, and because it's temporary, I'm going to make the most of it.
For sure. And also keeping in mind what we were talking about earlier of like, it's okay if it looks different. Like the journey you're on with this is a great example. So it's like, it's okay if it takes you from here to there and then it looks like this or that. Like that still was part of that. And then it's like, all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I wouldn't be here if not for all of this stuff. So it's like, I think there's an element of not being attached to how it looks and to the outcome of things, where it's like you have your intention, you have your goals, and then what, right? Like you kind of move through that and it is temporary, but there's so much value in like, having some meaningful, purposeful mission, I guess, and then carrying that somewhere, and where that happens to be, I don't think you know.
I don't know. And I think this conversation is really timely that we're having right now. And that's how I perceive the world. I do think like things fall into alignment as they're meant to. Like it's like this collective energy that we're all moving through and navigating. And so I imagine this conversation will resonate with a lot of people and activate other people. And both of those things are important to be curious about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really, really enjoyed this, Carson.
Yeah, this is fun.
I feel like we could talk all day about all the things. It was very, very deep and meaningful. I always ask, I always end my podcast like this, if there's any like final words, anything you want to leave listeners with, anything else you want to share with me.
Just kind of the closing out. We kind of talked about this, right? It's been carried through the whole conversation, but something I've been focusing on a lot lately is simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's really pertains to this conversation. So I'd like to end with it too, because the world is noisy and sometimes we get carried all sorts of places, and it's so easy to forget what we're doing and why we're doing it. And simplicity is important because when you pull back away from all of this stuff or whatever's going on, you can start to see what serves you, what doesn't. Like, why am I even involved here? What am I doing? And it helps you kind of find your grounding again. And simplifying in today's world, I feel like, especially in this digital world that we live in often, where you're seeing this podcast, it's like we're tuned into so much. And sometimes we forget why we're even tuned into it. And we get lost in the chaos of the world. And that's not to say anything about that is like negative or anything. It's just a matter of like your intention and why you're there in the first place. And sometimes pulling back from the noise of the world is a good thing so that you can realize why you're there in the first place, why you're participating, why you're invested, why you're tuning in, and then let it be things that serve you and elevate you and contribute to who you are, the mission that you have in life, and let it like create momentum for you and let it participate in that manner versus like bringing you down, causing anxiety and stress and all these things that, happen if we're chronically online, if we're tuned into the noise of the world. So I would like to just leave it with that, I guess, is like, that's something that I find important and really valuable today. And so, yeah, I think that simplicity is a really good place to start.
Yeah, I love that message. I think that is an incredible message to end on. I have found in my own personal experience that the simplest things are the things that bring me the most joy and clarity and peace. And
Yeah,
it's such a valuable place to start. Well, thank you. Thank you for your wisdom today, Carson.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, I'm going to bring you back with all your wisdom again. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will see you again next time. Thank you for being a part of Sunflower Movement today. Just like sunflowers turn toward the light, may you keep leaning into growth, healing, and the spaces where you feel seen. If today's content resonates with you, please share, like, and review. It would mean the world to me.